It's always hard to break up good conversations. Janine, you know it's a good dinner party when everyone's having fun talking to each other. All right, we got, everyone knows. Does everyone know Janine, by the way? I'm just checking, right? Under the Yass Prize. And thank you, again, on behalf of all of us, Janine, thank you and Jeff for everything you're doing in this lovely night and all we're doing today for education, all you're doing. Appreciate it. Now, Paul Clement, Clement Murphy's your firm now, but you were Solicitor General. Nobody, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but nobody has argued more cases this century in front of the Supreme Court than you. How many cases do you know offhand?
So it's 121, but who's counting?
121, but who's counting? All right. Which justice asked the hardest questions?
Well, I'd say Justice Scalia, but I did clerk for him, so it's a safe answer.
A safe answer. All right. Well, that's how you win cases, right? All right. So, since we're talking about arguing and arguments, I'm going to read an argument that was in Forbes. So it must be a good argument. And I'm going to put on my glasses. And here we go. It says, if a child leaves a public school, a portion of that money earmarked for his or her education shouldn't stay with the school. It should follow the child. That's the argument of Forbes. Janine, do you know who wrote that in Forbes?
Some brilliant author.
Janine wrote that. Janine wrote that. That's the that is the topic. That is the topic for the next 15 minutes or so that we're going to talk about. Now, first, again, I always thought it did. Explain, like some of it does and some of it doesn't. How does it work?
Right, common sense, it should, right? And that's wherever I go, and I ask these questions when I go to visit different award winners and places. Even some of our award winners and a lot of the politicians and school board people don't realize this. But for example, when 20 years ago when we first started our first charter school in Philadelphia, I was asking a question. I was very naive that the charter schools got such less amount of money per child than the district schools. And it just doesn't make sense. The parents don't realize that. The charter schools in a lot of states don't get money for busing, for their sports programs, all that, for buildings. They get a third of the cost of what they would get if they're in a regular public school. So a lot of people aren't aware of that. They're also not aware of these crazy rules called hold harmless clauses, which I've learned about in a lot of Northeast cities where you could lose 200 kids could leave a school system in a city, and they leave, they go somewhere else. They go to Catholic schools or other private schools or leave the city, but the funding for that school district they will not lose one penny even though 200 kids leave. They are guaranteed to make the same amount of money, to get the same amount of money every year, which doesn't make any sense.
How, Paul, you won a lot of hard cases. What is the case that is to be made, and is there a case? And if so, what is the case that this money should port with the kid?
So there is a case to be made, and I think part of the building blocks for the case are some of the case law that has developed over the last 5 or 10 years that makes it clear that if there's going to be any kind of parental choice program, if there's going to be school programs that allow, say, Catholic schools or private schools to participate, then it is unconstitutional for the government to discriminate against the schools, either barring the religious schools or treating them differently. And then that kind of opens the door for the idea that there really has to be a non-discrimination principle. And you can't say, all right, well, you can participate in this parental choice program, but if you do that, that's only going to open up, say, $10,000. Whereas if there's a traditional public school, that's going to be $25,000 per kid or whatever it is, and you're never going to be able to equalize that. The idea of the legal challenge is to really use a non-discrimination principle to say that the money has to go with the child.
So it's 14th Amendment, or?
It could be the 14th Amendment. It could also be the First Amendment if you have an ecosystem that includes religious schools.
How does this then? All right. So given that, Janine, what you talked about, what Paul talked about, what's the practical path, the best, most likely path to get this done in the near future, to be able to establish a policy where the money goes with the kid?
Well, even a lot of the states are coming up with the voucher programs. There's a lot of inequality in that as well, which we thought originally that was going to be the solution. Like for example, in the state of Florida, when I visited Sail Future with one of our star alumni here with Mike, we were talking, and he gets the voucher for, I think it's about $8,000. Now, if those kids did not stay in the St. Petersburg system, they dropped out, they did not want that St. Petersburg system, they would have gotten $28,000. So that $20,000 discrepancy, oftentimes it just stays in the system after those kids leave, and it just gets absorbed with more programs, more administration. It becomes part of the fat. It does not follow the child. So I'm not sure, and you're the lawyer, but I sometimes think that someone should sue on behalf of the child, that this is like not fair for that poor child that decided they were not getting educated in that system and chose a cheaper system that's better.
And I think in a lot of these states, the impetus for a voucher program, a parental choice program, is coming from the state. And so what happens is those programs are limited to the tax money that's in the state bucket. And what they can't reach under state law is the money that's in the local property tax system. Now, it varies from state to state, but that tends to be the dynamic, and it's why you have this inequity built into the system that, okay, great, you get a voucher, but it's only an $8,000 voucher, not what it should be, which is a $28,000 voucher. And I think the great possibility of a constitutional challenge using the federal constitution is that those state law, vagaries of state law, what's in the local bucket, what's in the state bucket, they don't matter. I mean, that's the lesson of some of the recent cases where states try to say, well, we got a state constitution that essentially makes us discriminate against religious schools. And the court said, no, that doesn't work. The federal constitution trumps.
I'm going to play Justice Scalia and try to ask you a stump you question, which is, what do you do then for a state that doesn't have any choice program, says we're not discriminating because we don't have any choice program? So what's the solution there?
So it is a bit of a stumper, and that is where we are with the law right now, which is if you have some kind of sort of voucher program, and the logic of the argument I think would extend even if you have certain kinds of charter programs, but if you have programs, you can't discriminate. But nothing tells you right now that you just can't treat everybody the same, which is everybody gets treated lousy, and there's no parental choice. But I do think one of the things I like about this legal argument is I think in the long run it can work in the courts, but I think in the short run it can put a lot of pressure on this argument. Because I think, as you said, Janine, most people just don't understand this. They think that when you have a parental choice program, when you have a voucher program, the full amount of money just is strapped to the child's back and follows them. And in reality, it's less than half in most places.
I don't have a law degree, but I tell stories for a living. And sometimes the best way to move somebody is to give examples. Janine, I'm going to put you on the spot here. Think about whether it's some of the 23 who are already winners tonight, or maybe some of our alumni. Think about this if this happened. What are some programs that you've seen come through, the Yass family here that would be accelerated? And so what, let's give a real life example of what would happen if this became a reality.
Let me think. Well,
Like like the sale, have a,
Yeah, look at Sale Future. They would
Sale
have
Future.
tripled the amount of money.
Right.
They would triple the money and a much better product. Imagine what the product would be like with triple the amount of money and the amount of children they could serve. He's limited, Mike, with how many kids he could serve with this funding.
It's actually, if we think about everybody we talked to today, this is in some ways the keys to a lot of this, because when and if this happens, it opens up all sorts of things. What kind of, for either of you, what's the timetable here? Is this a 10-year journey, a 2-year journey, a 20-year journey? Like, how fast can this happen, this challenge happen?
Well, I just want to say that my husband 10 years ago started talking about having all the money follow a child, use the amount of money, say in Philadelphia you would get $25,000 a kid. Imagine a parent that has 3 kids in the system. They would get $75,000 a year to figure out how much they want to spend for education, put some of that money, what they don't spend on education, into a savings account. I mean, it would really end poverty if it was done that simply. It's way too simple, I think, to get things like that passed politically. But if that would be some kind of goal in the future, to have something that's simple, stupid, that would benefit so many children, what a wonderful world it would be.
And I'll just add that, anytime you're talking about litigation, you're usually talking about a longer-term fight. I mean, I was very privileged as a very young lawyer to be involved in the Wisconsin school choice litigation at the very beginning. So I'm delighted that Dr. Fuller's here. But that took a while to get that through the system, and then it took a few more years to get the Ohio case to go all the way to the Supreme Court, and you see all the things that have happened as a result. So I think you have to take a long-term view, but I also think one of the things that could be a shortcut with this kind of case is it's not a foreordained conclusion that the state that you sue is going to fight you to the end. Because the reality is, in a lot of these states, at the state level, they get it, and they really are fighting the local bureaucracy or state law that just bakes this into the property tax system. So if you could find the right state where their reaction to being sued on this theory is not, we're going to fight you to the end, but heck, you have a point.
We'll take it.
That could shorten the time frame.
And Senator Blackburn talked about, state by state and states being the great laboratory. Is there any precedent that, you like that gives you hope on this?
Well, I think it's the recent decisions, and they do come up in the religion context as opposed to the Equal Protection Clause context. But I think the recent cases, the Espinoza case, the Carson case out of Maine, those are the cases that have really kind of been transformational in thinking about a non-discrimination principle at the federal level that trumps state law. And I will say, since I was privileged to be involved at the Wisconsin school choice in the beginning, at the time that case was brought, the idea, the whole issue was whether school choice was consistent with the Establishment Clause. The idea that you actually would have a free exercise right to participate in a choice program was laughed out of court. And that's the position that's won in the Supreme Court in Espinoza and Carson. So you really can make a lot of progress if you plant the right seed.
I feel like we've gotten a preview of things to come. Very important. This goes, as we were talking about, Janine, this goes to the heart of everything that the Yass Prize is about. We're at time, but we thank you very much for this conversation. We thank you again, Janine and Jeff, for everything you do.
Thanks, Randall.
Paul, I have a feeling this is not the last we've heard from you. We'll hear from you on this, so stay tuned. But meanwhile, I know we have a lot of big decisions and big reveals to come. But first, so thank you first of all for the great panel.
Thanks, Randall.